What if I told you that one quiet habit many men never talk about after a certain age could either support their health or slowly drain it, depending on how and why it's done? Not alcohol, not sugar. I'm talking about masturbation after 50, 60, and beyond. Before you scroll away, listen to this short story. A retired teacher named Ahmed came to his doctor feeling exhausted, unmotivated, and strangely disconnected from himself. His tests were mostly normal. But when the doctor asked about daily habits, sleep, stress, loneliness, Ahmed hesitated. Then he admitted something he had never told anyone. He was using masturbation not for pleasure, but as an escape from boredom, anxiety, and isolation. That conversation changed everything. Today, I'm asking you to watch this. Not to shame you, not to scare you, but to give you clarity, dignity, and control over your health as you age. When a man is young, his body operates like a fast-charging battery. Hormones surge easily, recovery happens quickly, and the nervous system resets with little effort. Testosterone replenishes rapidly, dopamine levels stabilize faster, and sleep often repairs whatever strain the day or night created. In that phase of life, masturbation rarely leaves a noticeable mark. A young man can release sexual energy and wake up the next morning feeling normal, motivated, and physically capable. Because of this, many men unconsciously assume that what felt harmless at 25 will feel the same at 55 or 65. But the aging body does not work by the same rules. As men grow older, several quiet but important biological shifts take place. Testosterone production naturally declines, and more importantly, the body becomes slower at restoring hormonal balance after stimulation and release. The nervous system, which governs arousal, relaxation, and emotional regulation, also becomes more sensitive with age. This means that strong stimulation followed by release can create a deeper drop in energy and alertness than it once did. What used to feel neutral may now feel draining, even if the man cannot immediately explain why. The brain changes as well. Dopamine, the chemical responsible for motivation, drive, and pleasure, does not rebound as easily in later life. When sexual stimulation occurs, dopamine spikes, but in older men the post-release dip can last longer. This can subtly affect mood, focus, and enthusiasm for daily tasks. Many men interpret this as laziness, loss of ambition, or just getting old, without realizing that repeated patterns of stimulation and release are interacting with an aging nervous system that needs more time to recover. Energy levels are another critical factor. Aging bodies require more intentional recovery. Sleep becomes more fragile, and the quality of rest matters more than ever. Masturbation late at night, especially when combined with screens or fantasy, can overstimulate the brain and delay deep sleep cycles. In younger years, the body can compensate. In later years, the cost shows up the next morning as mental fog, stiffness, low motivation, or a sense of heaviness that lingers throughout the day. This doesn't mean masturbation suddenly becomes bad or forbidden with age. The act itself is not the problem. The difference lies in frequency, timing, intention, and recovery capacity. The older body sends clearer signals when something is taking more than it gives. Unfortunately, many men were never taught to listen to these signals. Instead, they continue habits formed decades earlier, unaware that their physiology has changed. Another overlooked aspect is emotional regulation. With age, unresolved stress, loneliness, and anxiety often increase, especially after retirement, loss of routine, or social isolation. Masturbation can quietly shift from a physical release to an emotional coping mechanism. When that happens, the nervous system is repeatedly trained to seek relief through stimulation rather than restoration. In a younger body, this pattern may go unnoticed. In an older body, it can accelerate fatigue, emotional flatness, and loss of vitality. Understanding that the aging body responds differently is not about fear or restriction. It is about wisdom. Aging brings the advantage of self-awareness. When men recognize that their body now requires more respect, more recovery, and more balance, they regain control. They stop assuming decline is inevitable and start seeing how lifestyle choices interact with biology. A short example makes this clear. Consider a man in his early 60s who has recently retired. In his younger years, he masturbated frequently with no noticeable effect. Now, he notices that on mornings after late-night stimulation, he feels unusually tired, unfocused, and irritable. At first, he blames age, But when he experiments by reducing frequency and avoiding late-night stimulation for a few weeks, he notices something surprising. His sleep improves, his morning energy returns, and his motivation to exercise and socialize increases. Nothing mystical happened. His aging nervous system simply stopped being overtaxed and was given room to recover. This is the key truth many men miss. Aging does not remove desire, but it changes recovery. What once required little thought now requires awareness. When men understand this difference, they stop fighting their body and start working with it. The result is not loss, but renewed clarity, energy, and a stronger sense of control over their health as they age. For many men, masturbation has never been something they stopped to analyze. It was simply a physical act, a release, something automatic and familiar. But as men grow older, the most important factor is no longer the act itself. What matters far more is the reason behind it and how frequently it is being used. The body and mind respond very differently to mindful, occasional sexual release than they do to habitual or emotionally driven patterns. Occasional masturbation, that comes from natural desire, relaxation, or healthy curiosity, usually does not create problems. In this context, it is a conscious choice, not a reflex. The nervous system is calm, the mind is present, and the body can recover. Many older men in stable emotional states experience no negative effects when masturbation is infrequent and not tied to stress or compulsion. In fact, it can even support body awareness and reduce tension. The problem begins when masturbation quietly shifts roles. Instead of being a response to desire, it becomes a response to discomfort. Loneliness, boredom, anxiety, sadness, or stress begin to trigger the urge. In these moments, masturbation is no longer about pleasure, it becomes a coping mechanism. The brain learns to associate emotional relief with sexual stimulation, and over time this pattern can become automatic. The man may not even feel strong desire, just a vague restlessness that pushes him toward the habit. This is where frequency matters. When masturbation is used repeatedly as an emotional escape, the nervous system never fully resets. Each release provides a short-term sense of relief, but it is often followed by a subtle drop in energy, motivation, or mood. In older men, this drop can be more noticeable because emotional resilience and hormonal recovery are already more delicate. The result is a quiet cycle. Stress or emptiness leads to stimulation. Stimulation leads to brief relief. Relief fades into fatigue or flatness, and the cycle repeats. Emotionally driven use can also reduce awareness of deeper needs. Instead of recognizing loneliness and seeking conversation, connection, or purpose, the brain learns to silence the signal with stimulation. Instead of addressing anxiety through movement, breathing, or rest, it is temporarily numbed. Over time, this avoidance can actually strengthen the very emotions the habit was meant to escape. The man feels more isolated, less motivated, and less emotionally grounded, yet cannot immediately identify why. Another important aspect is attentional energy. When masturbation is frequent and habitual, especially when paired with fantasy or screens, it can train the brain to seek quick dopamine rather than sustained satisfaction. For older men, this can translate into less patience, less interest in long-term goals, and reduced enjoyment of simple activities. Life begins to feel flatter, not because it truly is, but because the brain has been conditioned to expect intense stimulation as a baseline. None of this means masturbation must be eliminated. The key is awareness. Asking simple but honest questions can change everything. Is this coming from desire or discomfort? Do I feel genuinely relaxed afterward or slightly drained? Am I choosing this or am I avoiding something else? These questions shift the act from unconscious habit to conscious behavior. Awareness alone often reduces frequency naturally, without force or guilt. It is also important to recognize that emotional needs change with age. Retirement, reduced social interaction, loss of routine, or physical limitations can increase feelings of emptiness. The body then looks for familiar ways to self-soothe. Masturbation becomes easy because it is private, instant, and predictable. But predictability is not the same as nourishment. Emotional health requires connection, meaning, and engagement, things stimulation cannot replace. A short example illustrates this clearly. Imagine a man in his late 50s who lives alone after his children move away. In the evenings, he feels restless and slightly sad, though he cannot fully explain why. Out of habit, he masturbates almost every night. For a few minutes, the discomfort fades, but over weeks he notices he feels less motivated in the mornings and more emotionally numb. When he begins paying attention, he realizes the urge appears strongest on nights when he has not spoken to anyone or done anything engaging. By replacing a few of those nights with a walk, a phone call, or a hobby, the urge weakens and his energy improves. The act itself was never the enemy. The emotional role it was playing was. Ultimately, the real issue is not masturbation, but unconscious use. When older men bring awareness to why and how often they engage in it, they reclaim choice. The habit either finds a healthy place or naturally loosens its grip. This is not about control through force, but clarity through understanding. And with clarity comes better energy, emotional balance, and a stronger sense of self-respect. As men grow older, the brain's relationship with stimulation changes in subtle but powerful ways. One of the most important systems involved is the dopamine system, which governs motivation, focus, drive, and the feeling of reward. Dopamine is not just about pleasure, it is the fuel that helps a man get out of bed with purpose, stay mentally sharp, and feel engaged with life. When stimulation becomes excessive, especially sexual stimulation paired with AZ, screens, or late-night habits, this system can gradually become overstressed. In younger years, the brain is remarkably resilient. Dopamine spikes are followed by relatively quick recovery, motivation returns easily, and the nervous system adapts without much cost. But with age, dopamine production and receptor sensitivity naturally decline. This means that intense or frequent stimulation can have a stronger after effect. The spike still happens, but the drop afterward lasts longer. Over time, this can quietly dull motivation and focus without the man realizing what is happening. Excessive sexual stimulation trains the brain to expect high-intensity reward with minimal effort. When this becomes frequent, everyday activities begin to feel less satisfying by comparison. Exercise feels harder to start, conversations feel less engaging, reading, hobbies, or creative tasks seem less interesting. This is not because these activities lost value, but because the brain has been conditioned to crave stronger stimulation. In older men, this effect is more pronounced because the brain's ability to rebalance itself is slower. Another important factor is mental clarity. Many older men report brain fog, difficulty concentrating, or feeling mentally flat. While aging itself plays a role, overstimulation can intensify these symptoms. Frequent dopamine spikes followed by prolonged lows can reduce the brain's baseline alertness. This can make it harder to sustain attention, make decisions, or feel confident in one's thoughts. Over time, this mental dullness can erode self-esteem, creating the feeling that one is losing sharpness. Even when intelligence and experience are still intact, late-night stimulation adds another layer of strain. Sexual stimulation, especially when combined with screens, activates the nervous system at a time when it should be winding down. In older men, sleep architecture is already more fragile. Overstimulation before bed can delay deep sleep, reduce sleep quality, and interfere with natural hormonal rhythms. Poor sleep then worsens dopamine balance the next day, leading to fatigue, irritability, and reduced drive. This creates a loop where stimulation is used to cope with low energy, but ultimately deepens it. Vitality is not just physical strength or sexual ability, it is the feeling of being alive and engaged during the day. Excessive stimulation can slowly drain this vitality. Men may still function, but with less enthusiasm, less emotional presence, and less confidence. They may withdraw from social interaction, exercise less, and feel less connected to their own goals. Because this decline is gradual, it is often mistaken for inevitable aging rather than a reversible pattern. It is important to understand that this is not about moral judgment or fear. The issue is not sexuality itself, but imbalance. When stimulation consistently exceeds recovery, the nervous system becomes taxed. Older bodies and brains require more recovery time and more moderation. Without it, drive and focus fade, not dramatically, but quietly. A short example illustrates this clearly. Consider a man in his early 60 seconds who spends his evenings alone watching videos on his phone. Sexual stimulation becomes frequent and effortless, often late at night. Over months, he notices he feels less motivated to exercise, struggles to concentrate during the day, and feels oddly disconnected from activities he once enjoyed. He assumes this is just aging. When he later reduces late-night stimulation its screen use and redirects his evenings toward walking and reading, something unexpected happens. Within a few weeks, his mental clarity improves, his motivation returns, and he feels more confident and engaged. Nothing external changed, his brain simply regained balance. This example highlights a critical truth: the brain is adaptable at any age. When overstimulation is reduced, dopamine pathways begin to recalibrate. Motivation gradually returns. Focus sharpens. Energy feels steadier rather than spiking and crashing. Older men often discover that they did not lose their drive. It was simply buried under too much stimulation. Ultimately, excessive stimulation does not steal vitality overnight. It erodes it slowly. Awareness is the turning point. When men understand how frequent stimulation affects the aging brain, they regain the ability to choose balance over habit. That balance restores not only focus and motivation, but also a deeper sense of confidence and engagement with life itself. As men pass the age of 50, sleep, hormones, and recovery become tightly linked in ways they may never have needed to think about before. In younger years, the body could tolerate late nights, strong stimulation, and irregular routines with little consequence. A short night of sleep or a burst of stimulation rarely left lasting effects. But with age, the body's internal rhythms become more sensitive, and small disruptions can ripple through energy levels, mood, and overall vitality. Sexual habits, especially when they occur late at night, are one of those quiet disruptors that many men overlook. Sleep is the foundation of hormonal balance. During deep sleep, the body repairs tissues, regulates stress hormones, and produces much of its daily testosterone. After 50, deep sleep naturally becomes lighter and shorter, which means the window for recovery is already reduced. When night masturbation occurs, particularly close to bedtime, it stimulates the nervous system at a moment when the body should be shifting into rest mode. Heart rate increases, the brain becomes alert, and dopamine surges. While release may feel relaxing afterward, the nervous system often remains activated beneath the surface, delaying entry into deep, restorative sleep. This disruption may not always be obvious. A man might still fall asleep, but the quality of that sleep is compromised. He may wake up feeling unrefreshed, mentally foggy, or emotionally flat. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Poor sleep leads to lower testosterone production, which then affects energy, muscle maintenance, mood stability, and sexual confidence. Lower testosterone also makes it harder to recover from stress and physical exertion, creating a feedback loop where fatigue feeds into more fatigue. Hormones do not operate in isolation. Testosterone, cortisol, melatonin, and dopamine all interact. Late-night stimulation can suppress melatonin, the hormone that signals sleep, while increasing cortisol, the stress hormone. In older men, cortisol tends to stay elevated longer, especially when sleep is disturbed. Chronically elevated cortisol can blunt testosterone further and increase feelings of anxiety, irritability, or emotional numbness. What many men describe as just getting older is often this hormonal imbalance quietly playing out day after day. Recovery is the third piece of the puzzle. After 50, the body needs more time to recharge, muscles repair more slowly, the nervous system takes longer to calm down, and mental energy is more precious. When sleep is compromised, recovery suffers. A man may notice he is less motivated to exercise, takes longer to bounce back from physical activity, or feels drained even after relatively easy days. Sexual habits that interfere with sleep indirectly reduce the body's ability to recover, even if the act itself seems minor. Another overlooked factor is timing. Masturbation earlier in the day rarely has the same impact as late-night stimulation. The body is designed to be alert during daylight hours and restorative at night. When stimulation consistently pushes into the late evening, it confuses this rhythm. Over months or years, the body adapts to a lower baseline of energy. Morning alertness declines, motivation fades, emotional resilience weakens. Because this happens gradually, many men accept it as inevitable aging rather than a modifiable habit. It is important to emphasize that this is not about fear, shame, or strict rules. It is about understanding how the aging body works. After 50, sleep is medicine. Hormones are more fragile. Recovery is slower. Anything that interferes with these processes carries more weight than it once did. When men respect these changes, they often regain energy and clarity they thought were gone forever. A short example illustrates this clearly. Imagine a 55-year-old man who feels constantly tired despite sleeping 7 hours a night. He often masturbates late in the evening to relax before bed. He assumes his low morning energy and lack of focus are normal signs of aging. 1 month, he decides to experiment. He avoids sexual stimulation after 9 p.m. and focuses on winding down earlier. Within weeks, he notices deeper sleep, more consistent morning energy, and a sharper mood during the day. Nothing dramatic changed. No supplements, no medication. His body was simply allowed to complete its natural sleep hormone recovery cycle. Example highlights an important truth: aging does not eliminate vitality, but it demands better timing and awareness. When sleep is protected, hormones stabilize. When hormones stabilize, recovery improves. And when recovery improves, men feel more alive, focused, and emotionally balanced. Many men are not losing energy because of age alone. They are losing it because their habits no longer match their body's needs. Understanding this connection gives men power. Instead of blaming age, they can adjust timing, prioritize sleep, and allow their body to work with them rather than against them. In doing so, they often rediscover a level of clarity and vitality they assumed was permanently lost. Many men approach the topic of sexual habits later in life with two extremes in mind. On one side is indulgence without reflection, driven by habit and impulse. On the other side is harsh suppression, fueled by guilt, fear, or the belief that desire itself is a problem. Neither extreme restores energy or well-being. In reality, the body responds best not to shame or denial, but to balance and self-control. Especially as men age, conscious regulation becomes a source of strength rather than restriction. Suppression often backfires. When a man tells himself that desire is wrong or that he must completely eliminate a natural urge, the nervous system remains tense. Desire does not disappear, it goes underground. This internal conflict consumes mental energy and increases stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this stress drains vitality, worsens sleep, and weakens emotional resilience. Shame also disconnects a man from his body. Instead of listening to signals of fatigue, desire, or emotional need, he learns to judge them. That judgment itself becomes exhausting. On the other hand, lack of regulation can quietly deplete energy. When masturbation happens automatically, frequently, or compulsively, it often reflects not desire but avoidance. The body releases energy repeatedly without adequate recovery, and the mind relies on stimulation instead of restoration. Over time, this pattern can lead to poorer sleep, flatter mood, and reduced motivation. The man may feel less confident and less present in daily life, even though nothing appears wrong on the surface. Balance sits between these extremes. Balance means recognizing desire without being controlled by it. It means allowing sexual expression without turning it into a reflex. Self-control, in this sense, is not punishment. It is direction. It allows